Hey, welcome into SportsSource.tv. We appreciate you joining us for our overtime segment today. Chuck Cavaleris, Bob Hodge, Jimmy Himes here. This segment brought to you by Jinx Logos, and their logo is on the shirt, or their shirt is on the chest of Chuck Cavaleris, Bob Hodge, Jimmy Himes. That's our logo, their shirt. Jinx Logos does a tremendous job. Call Jimmy Andrews and his crew, 755-7767. 755-7767. Gentlemen, for the first time since 2006-2007, incredible if you think about this, Tennessee is returning its entire coaching staff. That was 6 off seasons where at least one coach left. That's and usually it was more than one, but at least one left between 2007 and 2013. Here's the question: how much will continuity on the coaching staff help this year's team, considering half the team is new? I would view it as a bigger plus if you had a real veteran team. But you've got the coaches back, but you got so many new players. I mean, about half your team is turned over. Does that offset the continuity thing? How big of a deal is the continuity with this year's team?
I think it helps, but I think it's mitigated by the point you made. You've got so many young players you're trying to mix into the equation, so they're still learning. Now, it does help that some returning players can help them with that system too, but I think it's mitigated by the youth, and I think it's also mitigated by the fact that overall talent-wise, you're still short. And so I don't see a returning staff making you go from 5 wins to 8. So I think it'll help some, but not to the point where Tennessee becomes a contender.
I think if we're sitting here this time next year, it's huge.
Right.
Because now you've got all these guys in the system, and I still think it's going to help. I think
it can't
Tennessee,
be a minus. I mean,
they've changed coaches so much, and the bad thing is you've gone through coordinators. And now you've got your coordinators in place. Your system's not going to change. So I think it's big. Kind of go back to when we were doing earlier in the show. Okay, it could be this or it could be this. Well, I think it's kind of like this. I think it's a good thing for Tennessee, but it's not going to make that much of a difference.
And when you already have so many question marks too, you know, with your line, and then you've had you're shuffling coordinators, you've been making all these changes. I think that's what they really need to settle on. That's what some of your quarterbacks were talking about too. We actually get to keep the same terminology for 2 years in a row. And you're not having to think and translate stuff as much.
And I asked, what's it going to mean for this year? Here's where I think it really helps you. Recruiting. For gosh sakes, you got the same coaches dealing with these recruits for 2 years in a row, and dealing with coaches and programs for the first time in years, that it's the same guy going to visit this school. I think that's where it's a bigger deal this year. I think the continuity is going to help more on the recruiting trail than it will on the field and the one-loss record.
It already has with the 22 commitments. They only have room for 3 more. Now, something tells me they'll have more than 3 commits because there'll be some attrition among the commitments that they already have. But that's a really good point with recruiting. And I do think that when this staff was put together by Butch Jones, there was a question mark, and I raised it too. How well will they be able to recruit in the South? How well will they be able to recruit in the SEC against the Alabamas, the LSUs, the Georgias, et cetera? They have proven they've done a really good job, and I give Butch Jones credit for recognizing the coaches that can recruit in the South.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I asked that question when Vanderbilt hired James Franklin. You're getting a guy with no SEC ties, and none of his assistants had any SEC ties at all. Butch Jones at least went out and got a Thigpen, a Martinez, who had been in the SEC at least, whereas Franklin had nothing. And yet, for Vanderbilt, he was recruiting, well, heck, for just a regular school, he was recruiting top 25 classes. So I'm ready to retire that. The next time somebody comes into the SEC with an all-new staff that might not be from the South, it's just about the individual. I think if you've got a guy who can sell cars in Michigan, he can probably sell them in California.
And Nick Saban, if you want to go back to Michigan, coming from Michigan State to LSU, recruited well.
And a lot of those guys will tell you too, it's about having time to build relationships, being able to make that and have contacts and make them work. I mean, Vanderbilt had a pretty good situation, I thought James Franklin inherited. I mean,
with the redshirt juniors.
Yeah, it was better than most, I would say.
Most Vanderbilt situations.
Exactly.
But still, his recruiting is what wowed everyone. Yeah. Anything to close with, Bob?
Well, I mean, I just think that having these same guys in place as far as the recruiting goes, and face it, this is a small part of that, but you don't have to worry about when this guy leaves, Now he's calling that guy and saying, look, I was telling you last week Tennessee's great. You ought to see the surf out here in California. You'll love it. And it's happened. And it makes Tennessee fans mad. But by keeping them here, you don't have to worry about that.
One quick point to augment the point that you made earlier. The worst class, I believe, that Philip Fulmer ever had recruiting at Tennessee was after he had fired like 4 assistant coaches. That was the next year was the worst recruiting year that he had on paper, ranking-wise.
I think you have to applaud the guys that Tennessee has in there and what they're doing recruiting-wise. There's no way that you could say anything, but they're doing a tremendous job on the recruiting front. But the fact that they're keeping those guys year after year, that's where, if you, like you say, if you've got the same staff next year, it's going to start to pay even bigger dividends. So, all right. Hey, thanks for joining us here on SportsSource.tv. Join us next Sunday at 11 a.m. on WATE 6. We will have a brand new show for you covering all Tennessee practice, news, views, all kinds of stuff. In a couple of weeks from now, on the 17th of the month, we're going to have an all VFL show. We're going to have 8 to 12, 8, 10, 12 X-Vols right here talking UT football. A lot of stuff coming in August. Look forward to seeing you on the Sports Source.